Is the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour, which is a critical look at Canada's role abroad. I'm Eve Engler, and thanks for coming on. This is about the 150th week of this critical look at Canada's role abroad. I'm coming to you from Tiohtià:ke, which has long been a meeting place of various First Nations, otherwise known as Montreal. And I hope everyone has had a nice holiday period and is preparing for the new year. Sorry, I'm just trying to get some few things just in order here. There's a number of developments Canadian foreign policy this week, even though it was a holiday week. The Canadian government and the American government won a investor dispute tribunal over Mexico's restrictions on GM, genetically modified corn, and basically, as I understand it, have to Mexico's going to have to accept GM corn. I think principally coming from the U.S., but the Canadian government supported this legal case against Mexico. The Globe and Mail has a big long piece today about Canada's role in Afghanistan, and specifically this evidence that Colvin, forgetting his first name, he was the diplomat that blew the whistle on the torture of Afghans who were given by Canada over to the military, the Afghan military. And the main point of this big long article, big long piece, Colvin's done all this research. He's got this unpublished manuscript or something like that. He was a top Canadian diplomat in Afghanistan. And basically what he's saying is that according to his research, there's about 1,000, a bit more than 1,000 Canadians were detained and handed over to Afghan security forces outside of the established process, which was that included alerting the Red Cross to their detention. And so basically, the Canadian military, I think they said as 139 that were handed over by the proper mechanism, and according to Colvin's research, 1,000 to 1,200, I believe, that were basically given this categorization that made it so the military could bypass the usual or the proper mechanism. So he lists one day where like 60, I think 62 Afghans were detained by Canadian forces, and they didn't know anything about these people. They were just basically detaining people who were in an area. They were farmers in an area. There was not necessarily any evidence that they had any association with the Taliban, and presumably many of these people were mistreated. We don't know that, but that's the assumption that I think that most people would operate from. This week it was the New York Times, I believe, had a big long piece. I didn't read it all about just basically how U.S. policy in the North, how it turned so many Afghans against the U.S. because they supported the most brutal people. We knew this. This is just more and more evidence. But just more detail in the New York Times piece about just they supported the most kind of like horrific people, and so the population just totally turned on the occupation. And I think that this Globe Mail piece kind of fits a bit within that understanding of what happened in Afghanistan. And also, as was pointed out, the Trudeau government said they were going to have a investigation into all these matters before they got elected, and then Harjissajan, the defense minister, just who fought in Afghanistan, he just completely suppressed that. No, we don't need to. Canadian forces treated Afghans well. There wasn't a real issue of this of torturing of detainees and all this kind of stuff. The Globe today has a piece headline "Building a Better UN Security Council," and it's from Axworthy and Alan Rock. Axworthy, of course, is Canada's foreign minister. And I I don't know enough about the issue to be totally confident, but I don't necessarily oppose their suggestions. I think their suggestions would make the Security Council substantially better than it currently is. But their first rationale for why the Security Council needs to be reformed is that says Security Council member, Russia's invasion of Ukraine violated the most fundamental precept in the UN Charter, that such a lawless regime enjoys permanent status and holds a veto at the UN's most powerful table, brings the Council into disrepute, and renders the Council unfit for its most important purpose, which is maintaining international peace. Now, Lloyd Axworthy was the foreign minister when we bombed Serbia, Yugoslavia. I mean, come on. The Americans invaded Iraq. Come on. I mean, this level of just hypocrisy is beyond stunning. This just complete lack of self-awareness that a guy who was in charge of Canadian foreign policy, who completely justified, repeatedly justified, obviously, the 78-day bombing campaign where Canadian fighter jets bombing in contravention of international law. Uh, the fact that he does this, oh, Russia violated the precepts of the UN Charter and it gets to sit on the Security Council is just too much. Jimmy Carter died yesterday. Uh, and I didn't really, didn't look into it too much, but people on Twitter, obviously what he did on Palestine afterwards, I think is certainly a lot better than someone like Obama or Bill Clinton. Uh, but someone played a clip that I saw about Carter, about Chomsky going through U.S. presidents' crimes, and he talks about Carter and Indonesia's invasion of East Timor, and I think Chomsky's almost certainly correct in his assessment. But I just kind of thought that it would be worth mentioning that that's one of the things that Pierre Trudeau very much supported when he was prime minister, the Indonesian invasion of East Timor, even at the UN, even voted against condemning. They abstained a couple years and they voted against. I think the first year, in '76, they voted against condemning, and then they deepened relations with Suharto during this period while there was a genocide really against the Timorese population. The other thing I thought, the other element of foreign policy, I was thinking of writing a piece about Carter, Pierre Trudeau, and Canada's foreign policy in this period. The other part is that, and I don't know, I haven't, maybe it was in the book on, probably was in the book, the big long book about Canada, South Africa. I'm forgetting the title of it right now. But Pierre Trudeau was pretty bad on South Africa, on apartheid South Africa, during the latter part of the 70s. And I presume that's in part because of Washington's position on South Africa, and it's, in support of apartheid, in support of South Africa's wars in Southern Africa, in Angola, um, and so, anyways, I thought it's worth mentioning that's a little bit about the Carter kind of when talking about Carter and the great man and all the stuff that's all over the papers. There's a bit of context there, and Pierre Trudeau's kind of ties with that. I happened upon Maud Barlow's Twitter account. Again, that's the former head of the Council of Canadians. And honestly, I'm just, I've written about it, I think now twice, well, about a year ago, and then 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I got on. I don't know how I got on it, how I ended up there, but it's she blocked me some time ago, so I don't. Yeah, I don't know exactly, but it's just remarkable. I honestly, I think this needs to be a regular theme. Every couple of months probably deserves an article, because it's just reflective. This is somebody who was so important to the left for so long. uh, Maud Barlow was really upheld as this really important activist and player in the Canadian left, and she's just so absorbed in U.S. empire, anti-China, and wildly anti-Russia. Obviously, totally, puppeting the exact line on Syria, and so she has one post that I thought, a repost that I thought was kind of funny, and it's complaining that Jagmeet Singh is saying that we are, going to support non-confidence and have the government fall and have elections, which presumably Pierre Poilievre is sort of expected to win, and she reposts this thing about saying you should have told the CPC, the Conservative Party of Canada, there would be no election until Pierre Poilievre got his top secret clearance. And it's like, what this is setting up like a Russia gate, right? This is setting up a Russia gate that like Pierre Poilievre is like a foreign agent, and I don't mean like a US or Israel foreign agent. That's not what she's meaning. But that he's like a Russian foreign agent, and this whole like, what did the whole story, maybe India influenced the Conservative Party race on behalf of Polyev, and well, and that's all fine. Like that's all fine. Like I think that there's some worth, like, exploring that stuff. But this notion that like Pierre Polyev is not following the dictates of the Canadian security state. It's not like and for that reason we can't oppose Justin Trudeau's government. We can't allow elections. I mean, this is just totally sucked down the world of like, you know, the worst thing about Donald Trump is that he's going to not support NATO, not support the NSA, not support the CIA. That's why Donald Trump is bad. That's why Pierre Poilievre. That's the kind of direction that she's going, or that she's gone, and it's just quite honestly remarkable to see. And the this week I read this. Uh, I think it was a September issue of Monthly Review, a very good, big, long, 140-page issue of Monthly Review on prints almost entirely on U.S. policy in towards China, and sort of looking at, the questions of imperialism, and a whole bunch of factors. Korea, I'll get to that in a second. And in it, in the thing, they quote, I think that Hinkle is I can't remember his first name right now, and just an analysis on sort of global imperialism and the uneven international exchange of labor, right? Like, why does someone get paid 50 cents an hour in Port-au-Prince, whereas they get paid, at the low end, $16 an hour in Montreal, and I think maybe even worse if you looked at, the pay in Ethiopia. Maybe it's 25 cents an hour, Bangladesh, 40 cents an hour. So the when looking at it, it says this article, the global South workforce provides a staggering 90% of the labor to power the world economy, yet gets only 21% of global income. According to Hinkle, in 2021, wealthier countries imported 906 billion hours of embodied labor, the total amount of labor required to produce a good or offer a service from start to finish, from poorer countries. In return, they exported only 80 billion hours of any kind of labor, whether it was low-skilled work in sectors like agriculture or high-skilled labor in sectors like computer engineering. Hinkle says 820 billion hours of net labor extracted from the global South, which equals more than what is provided by the entire workforce of the United States and Europe combined. Um, so this is I don't exactly know how the this is quantified, but I think that the broad outlines is makes total sense to me. And again, back to the question of why does someone get paid 50 cents an hour in Port-au-Prince? Which is considered a good job, whereas a the minimum in Montreal is 16 an hour. How does that whole process of global imperialism, global power relations, uh, how wealth is extracted, how wealth shifts, et cetera, that goes into that whole question. Um, And in this monthly review on the article on Korea, and they look at how basically Korea is being used as a way to target China, and the they mention South Korea here principally. And he mentions that the United Nations command has three characteristics that make it eminently suitable as a vehicle for U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy. The first part is that it's not actually a UN command, so it's controlled by the U.S., and that goes back to the 1950 war, which is misleading, and that's because at that time the Soviet Union was boycotting the Security Council because Taiwan was representing China on the Security Council, and um, the other part is that it's so basically it can be scaled up, and it's been led by other countries. So right now, it's a Canadian, according to the story. It's that's leading the. It was an Australian. It was a Canadian, then an Australian, then a Brit, and now currently it's now commanded again by a Canadian. And I don't know the name of the Canadian commander, but I know that I'm a few years ago when I was looking at this, that I think it was that previous Canadian commander. Um, and so basically, it's this force that's supposedly UN command, but it's controlled by the US and not actually controlled by the UN. That's basically the countries that were fought in the Korean War on against North Korea and against China. And so I know that the Americans have been looking at that as part of their strategy for building up. And apparently in March, the UN command in Korea organized a big um, uh, Freedom Shield exercise, 12 countries, almost certainly Canada was part of that, as part of this with this right wing government in Korea that looks like of course the coup effort looks to cause the problem there. Also, in looking at the UN command a little bit, there's actually also a United Nations command rear which is based in Japan. This goes back to 1957, and uh, and the Canadian is the deputy commander. I believe it's an Australian who's the commander, and it's a Canadian deputy commander. There's not many. There's like only a half dozen or a dozen military personnel that are part of this UN Rear Command based in Japan. But again, it's sort of it's got this it's set up so it can be scaled up if there's a quote unquote emergency. It's just remarkable to me to see, first of all, that the Korean War is not over, which it's an armistice line, but in real and practical reality, Canada still, and obviously the U.S. has huge numbers of troops in South Korea, but Canada still has, and other countries still have troops, part of these UN, supposedly UN entities that are still in the region that are part of basically in today's terms, the contain China policy. So I think I want to actually try to interview the author Neil. He's based in New Zealand. I want to interview him to flush out Canada's kind of role in the UN command and how this all kind of fits with the contain China policy because it's not something that you hear much about, but clearly the Canadian government they use the sanctions against North Korea to justify militarizing the region to send Canadian spy planes, Canadian naval vessels, but they're also through the UN command. They're all part of the kind of American military presence in South Korea. Um, and I think this goes to this is in this monthly review they quote, and I didn't know this was a well-known quote, but apparently is C. Wright Mills is quoted, who was a very prominent sociologist back, I believe, beginning back in the 30s, maybe 40s, 50, I don't know, that kind of 50s, 60s kind of time. Uh, he he's currently quoted saying the immediate cause of World War III is the preparation of it. And that's clearly what's going on, uh, with regards to China. And you could argue that's part of what played out with NATO in Ukraine, but even more so, I think that's really apt for what's going on in Canada, U.S. Policy and others policy in Southeast Asia. Um, I'm just doing a piece. People have probably seen all these attacks on Yemen. Israel bombed, they almost killed the head of the World Health Organization at the airport in Sana'a. And the Americans, there's been a series of Israeli attacks. The Americans and the UK also hit Sana'a on Friday. And the Ansar Allah, or the Houthis, or the Yemeni government, there was a down American plane that downed, probably friendly fire, but they claimed the responsibility for knocking it down. Then these U.S. aircraft carrier, they claimed that their drones forced the U.S. aircraft carrier to basically retreat, and they showed image. This is almost certainly true. They showed image of blowing up another U.S. Reaper drone. And so there's clearly like lots of fighting going on. There's, most of the violence, of course, is being hit against Yemen. And the Israelis are making all kinds of really bombastic claims, and we're going to kill all the leaders, and we're just getting started, and all of this. And it's all kind of the root of it all, of course, is the Holocaust in Gaza and Ansar Allah's response with regards to the shipping back a year plus ago now, and that's just sort of escalated, and now is escalating and escalating, and now they're targeting more ships, and because the Americans bombing, and so it's a whole cycle of escalation. And I'm doing a piece just kind of flushing a little bit of what we know of the Canada's role, and I know there's way more going on in the background, but Canada listed Ansar Allah as a terrorist organization. So basically, Canadians can't ties to Yemen's government. A handful of Canadian officers are part of that operation, Protective Guardian, to target to respond to Ansar Allah's blocking of Israeli ships in the Red Sea. And we know there's all these Canadians that are at U.S. bases in the region and the Canadian base in Kuwait and through NORAD, that are almost certainly assisting the Americans and the UK more generally, and also Canadian naval vessels. The Canadian naval vessel HMCS Montreal went through the Red Sea in the summer, and then Canada commanded the Combined Task Force 150, which is one of the three or four different U.S. from the base in Bahrain to it's like 44 countries that are part of it, to basically monitor shipping in the region, including in the Red Sea. The Canadian one that we took charge of for about 6 months, I think that's the one right next to the Red Sea. It's in, I guess, the Gulf of Aden. Um, but so the Canada has contributed to this and a number of diplomatic statements condemning justifying the American UK bombing, and officially we're part of this coalition, six other countries beyond the US and UK. So that's something I think needs to be on our radar. But this is all to enable the horrors in Gaza, and the horrors in Gaza just they just continue, and it's just absolutely stunning what they did at the to the Kamal Adwan hospital. The just horrors, the treatment, mistreatment of the health staff. They've kidnapped the head of the hospital, the director, and it just continues killings of tens and tens every single day of Palestinians. These horrible stories. People saw about cats, lots of stories about dogs, but now the cats are eating dead bodies. The babies, the infants dying of hypothermia, all very predictable. It seems like the temperatures got really cold now, and people are intense, haven't eaten, injured. There aren't really the health facilities, and it's just a total, they've, complete genocide in northern Gaza. They've just driven everyone, basically everyone out, destroying. They're open about it now too. They don't even, the propaganda has really, has, they've dropped. Oh yeah, we just attack hospitals. No, they can never open that hospital. That's what the Israelis are saying. No, we're never going to let them open this hospital again. Um, and this, of course, as someone posted on X, the when the first bit of the Israeli horrors at the hospitals, the Al Shifa, maybe was that late October, I don't know, something around 2 or 3 weeks after October 7th, and uh, and then they did the whole thing. The Americans backed up the Israeli claims that, oh, no, 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 this was obviously Hamas that did it, whatever. And then Bill Blair and the Canadian Forces came out with their whole manufactured his whole claim. Yeah, yeah, no, we support the Israeli conclusion. And someone basically pointed out on X that this is, Bill Blair and Canadian Forces have, all kinds of blood on their hands in terms of Israel destruction of the medical world in Gaza by doing that early on, right? Supporting the Israeli uh, lies about this, and now no one doubts it anymore. I mean, they just destroyed every single hospital, bombed a couple more hospitals yesterday, and it's just stunning to watch. More than 1,000 health workers killed. A disproportionate, more than the general population is horrible. More disproportionate health workers have been killed. Um, on the note of Palestinian, the situation, the political situation of Palestinians, it's just stunning to see while the Holocaust going on, what's happening in Jenin, and the Palestinian Authority, the Canadian-backed, trained, financed Palestinian Authority security forces killing. They killed this young journalist who's covering their uh, their operations, and they've killed a number of Palestinians. And this week there was a couple stories in the papers about Operation Proteus, Canada's mission to build a Palestinian security force to oversee Israel's occupation. That Pruneau, who's the head of it, says his team is there's 30 Canadians, made up mostly of armed forces members, but also a civilian government official, RCMP officers, and two Peel regional police members. And one story was titled Canada's Little Known Crucial Role in Another Israeli Palestinian War. And this is the state of Palestinian politics where Israel's committing this Holocaust in Gaza, and we've created this force, Palestinian force, to suppress resistance to Israel's occupation. And they're doing it violently. And they're doing it violently in part so the PA may be able to, first of all, to show they're scared. There's PA scared that the Israelis will collapse it and that Trump will okay, the non-payment and the collapse of the PA. But they're doing it also to show that we could potentially rule in Gaza. And this is, Canada's right at the middle of this process of the building this Palestinian um, collaborator force. Remarkable to see. So this week there was protests on Boxing Day against Indigo, a number of places, and the Zionist world, went into a whole kerfuffle about this is Yara Sachs, the liberal Israeli citizen, liberal minister, health minister. saying protesting a Jewish-owned business in Canada is not the right to protest or freedom of expression. It is not lawful demonstration calling for peace. It is meant to create chaos and intimidate. It is inherently anti-Semitic, full stop. Uh, of course, Reisman and Schwartz have given about 200 million tax subsidized donations to a charity they set up to support non-Israelis joining the Israeli military. And this got me, among other things, got me going on this whole the coverage of anti-Semitism versus the babies dying, the people who've been displaced 10 times, who are facing famine, the utter horrors the Palestinians are facing in Gaza, and versus anti-Semitism. So I published a piece that on this matter. People can check on my site, and I started off with the that Dahlia Kurtz, total fanatic, total Jewish supremacist, fascist, openly racist, just oozing racism all over X, and has become very prominent among a certain milieu of fanatic Zionists over the past year and a bit, and the Winnipeg Sun profiles her in this totally wild way. Just, Palestinians don't exist, and just she's this great activist combating anti-Jewish hate in Canada. Da 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 da. And so I started out with that, but then I saw it made me think about trying to assess this. Is it actually true that there's been more focus on anti-Semitism than there has been on all the killings in Gaza? And I can't say that what I searched is a definitive proof of that, but I did a Canadian major dailies search through ProQuest or the Bonk, the library here, online search, and it has most of the major papers: the Globe Mail, Ottawa Citizen, National Post, Toronto Star, I believe, and others. And what I found, I searched anti-Semitism, and then I searched anti-Semitism with a hyphen, and combined, it's about 4,500 times since October 7th. 4,500 times since 15 months ago. And then I searched Palestine since that time, and there was 3,500 mentions. And then I searched genocide Israel, and there was 2,139 mentions. And then I searched famine Gaza, and there was 311 mentions. So there were more mentions of anti-Semitism than the word Palestine since October 7th, 15 months ago. And then obviously way more than Gaza. Then I did a search of Jagmeet Singh's and Trudeau's. I just assumed, I don't have any doubt that Pierre Poilievre's Twitter account has mentioned anti-Semitism way more times than killing of Palestinians. But then I searched Trudeau's Twitter account and Jagmeet Singh's Twitter account. And Trudeau, I was actually taken aback by this. So I went all the way back to July. For some reason, X wouldn't let me keep searching back after July. And and um, and Trudeau Twitter account, actually, he doesn't actually mention, between today or 2 days ago and July, he doesn't actually mention Palestinians. Doesn't mention their, suffering. He had one thing that was calling for a ceasefire that was kind of indirect mention of Palestinian civilians. And I believe, I don't have actually numbers right in front of me, but 9 times he condemned anti-Semitism with really strong language. Okay, so way more focus on anti-Semitism. And then he also, the 6 times he condemns Iran or Hamas or Samidun, and about 6 other, I think he condemns those. So then I searched Jagmeet's, I looked at Jagmeet. Jagmeet is a little bit more. I believe there's 17. I have the exact numbers in my article. 17 mentions that. Now, a bunch of them were about campaigning their call for the parliamentary vote. I could search him all the way back to March, I believe, Twitter allowed. But he has 17 mentions of things happening to Palestinians or campaigns, the NDP campaigns to call for a ceasefire or arms embargo. And then he had 10 mentions of anti-Semitism. And then there's a few others, and you can look at how the other things. So he's not far from like equal measure condemning anti-Semitism and the Holocaust in Gaza. Now, I don't think there's actually a single Jewish Canadian that's been. I'm not aware that anybody who's gone to a hospital okay, because of these incidents of anti-Semitism that we've heard so much about. Okay, I do not know if there is an individual, and I asked Sue-Ann Levy uh, post some stuff on this, and I asked Sue-Ann Levy, the former Toronto Sun columnist, and she didn't give me. She just responded by saying, anyways, but just was smearing me. So she didn't easily have a name of a Canadian Jew who's been sent to hospital because of these anti-Semitic incidents. So I'm not sure if there is one. This is amazing. This is amazing to see this, right? To see how the media has just whipped up, and the politicians have gone on this, more talk about anti-Semitism than the mass slaughter, genocide, Holocaust, whatever you want to call it. Certainly hundreds of thousands of people have been killed now in Gaza, and so I did this piece on on Joseph Rosen. Started off with this comment on Facebook. I think I might have talked about it last week. I did this piece where it looked at this question of responsibility and Canadian Jews who say they oppose the genocide, but and they basically they get they don't say anything about all the Jewish institutions that are promoting the genocide, but they feel personally impacted when a synagogue is targeted by late night when no one's there, a window's broken. And I do this thing, I think I talked about last week about Joseph Rosen's comment, and I start off with that in this piece. And this whole lack of responsibility. So I feel Jewish when a Jewish institution is targeted, and but I don't feel any like responsibility to condemn, to criticize publicly all these Jewish institutions that are enabling genocide, including in the case that Joseph Rosen did. He's this prof here in Dawson College. The synagogue that was targeted in West Montreal, West Island. It's very open on its website that it's we what's the right at the top of the website is we stand with Israel. They organized letters to Israeli forces, to IDF, sending letters to Israeli military. The Combined Jewish Appeal building that was also targeted. This is about 10 days ago. Well, Combined Jewish Appeal sends all kinds of money to Israel to support settlements, Israeli military, totally fanatic pro-Israel. So this article gets sent in the Independent Jewish Voices uh, um, discussion group. And the one guy, attacks it because I talk about who I think may actually be responsible. I mentioned that the Mossad may be involved in these attacks against Jewish institutions. I don't think it's only the Mossad. I think that anyways, I go through, who's actually been arrested, who hasn't been arrested. There's a number of Jewish people. We know there's 4 cases of Jewish people being detained for these incidents going back since 2017. And I go through who I think may have done it, including I think the Mossad may well be involved. And he says this is basically anti-Semitic to say that the Mossad may have been involved. People can take a look at the wording I use. Use very soft wording about this. And anybody who looks at what Mossad's done in all kinds of places, it's totally a possibility that the Mossad has been involved in this in Montreal as a way to deter Israelis from immigrating to Canada. That's a really big concern of the Israeli government. That's something that needs to be. And I'm not saying it's principally because of domestic Canadian foreign policy. I'm saying it's because that, and that's I think it took me a little while to think that one through. Back in October, 15 months ago. So then this one guy, so a bunch of people defend me in the IJV discussion, but this one guy then defends the other guy who's calling me an anti-Semite, and he refers to me as Engler as an execrable fool. And obviously, my story is anti-Semitic according to this person. Robin is a U of T email. And then that Joseph Rosen sends me this long message by Facebook, which I just saw earlier today. And in response to the article, and I'm not going to go through it all, but I want to like, maybe I won't even read any of it. He states that basically, okay, your point about responsibility of the Jewish institutions is interesting, okay, whatever. And then he gets going on it, and he basically says that he's been for over 2 decades. I have been calling out the manipulations of anti-Semitism within Zionist discourse. I've had my life threatened for doing such work, but online trolls who are probably not that different from you in personality. So basically saying he's been attacked by uh, Zionist Jewish people for questioning how much, the exploitation of anti-Semitism. And then he goes off into a whole thing of basically people like me are responsible for the violence because I don't have a critique of violence, and I have a toxic heart, and therefore these people, so basically me on one side, and then he's kind of hinting at this, and then the people running the Israeli government, they both have this sort of toxic heart. They don't criticize violence, and that's the real reason for what's happening to Palestinians in Gaza. And this is somebody who I have not seen at one demonstration against the Holocaust. I did see him once at the encampment, basically like haranguing these Muslim table at the McGill encampment. I saw him once in the summer there, and but the main point for me in seeing this is that he's the victim, right? He's been trying to challenge quietly, because there's nothing on online of him doing this, but quietly the pro-Israel Jewish community forces, and he's the real victim, and he's been doing it for 2 decades. And to be challenged on his anti-Palestinian Facebook comment like I did, that sort of this is he's the victim. This is like I genuinely believe he believes this too, right? He believes like no matter what happens in Gaza, no matter what happens in Gaza, Joseph Rosen is a victim in all this. That's in his own head. That's his kind of operating idea. And same like these people in the Independent Jewish Voices discussion group who are attacking me. They genuinely believe that they are the victims in all of this. And to me, it's just there is no threshold, right? There is no threshold to what can happen to Palestinians that even a chunk of the self-identified as pro-Palestinian a Jewish Canadian community will not still basically see themselves as victims in all this. There's a willingness. This is I posted this about the Jesse Brown, the Canadaland person. He will see every single Palestinian in Gaza can be wiped out, and he will still see the feelings of Jewish Canadians as like more important than the literally elimination of every Palestinian in Gaza. And this is the sort of ethos that our political culture is so oriented towards anti-Palestinianism and towards Jewish supremacism. It's reinforced from every different perspective of our political culture. Even Jagmeet Singh, as he's getting better on Palestine, is tweeting almost a similar number about anti-Semitism as he is about the horrors in Gaza. Right? This is being reinforced all over our political culture. That this is just how it plays out. Today, Sija posted an image of what seemed to be ski hills and says a white Hanukkah. Winter has arrived and coated Mount Hermon in snow. Perhaps quiet will allow Israel's children to soon return to play. That, of course, is the territory that Israel has illegally seized from Syria about 2 weeks ago. So this is their Hanukkah. We just stolen some more Syrian land, and happy Hanukkah, everyone. And that's a bunch of different wild Zionists are doing that, totally connecting Hanukkah to blowing up the one in Yemen, to putting up menorahs in Gaza. David Weinberg, who's Sija's representative in Israel, he has a column just published. Palestinianism is violence against Jewish, indigenous, and Israel. That's the title of his column. I didn't actually read the column, but this is the representative. Palestinianism, the existence of Palestinians is violence against the indigenous Jewry in Israel. This is the state of this discussion. Now, I've gone on too long, like too many times. Getting towards maybe I'll just finish off with Poilievre. I retweeted this to start the Polyev thing and to connect it to the protests at Indigo. I'm forgetting her name. She posted on X. In Canada, you cannot protest one of the biggest retailers in the country for its CEO having charity that funds the IDF because it's a quote Jewish-owned business. Between you and me, those saying this will also tell you identity politics have gone too far and that DEI is a threat to our society. Okay, so this gets to Pierre Poilievre, and this just got me going. He's got this interview that was released on the 24th from the with the Winnipeg the Jewish Winnipeg Jewish Review or Jewish Review of Winnipeg, and he posts it on his X account, and it's all about how he's going to defund wokeism and fight anti-Semitism. And he posted twice, so he's really behind this interview. And the interview, a big part of it, the part that really stands out for me, is a whole bunch. I'll get to the second part later on. But he basically is that we're going to defund wokeism and specifically universities. And so I mentioned this previously, and he has previously 2 months ago, I think on other occasions as well. Polyev is bringing up this: we're going to defund universities because this is his words. They're making Jewish students feel uncomfortable. Feel uncomfortable. Okay, he's using the word defund, right? Which is, of course, associated with Black Lives Matter. And that they feel uncomfortable. So this is somebody in 2022, he was calling for an ombudsperson or this, I forget, the guardian of free speech for universities while he was running for the head of the party. Guardian of free speech to deal with this, the fact that all these, supposed leftists are, trampling on free speech in university campuses because they feel uncomfortable about speech. But now he's openly saying we have to defund wokeism by taking an uber woke, which is the piece I wrote about Polyev, taking this uber woke position of defunding universities allow speech that makes Jewish students feel uncomfortable. It's just remarkable to see. And in this interview, Polyev says, I'm gonna basically, I want to starve Palestinians. I want to defund UNRWA. He says, I want to deliver more weapons to Israel. He says, he attacks Trudeau for implying he would fulfill the International Criminal Court arrest warrant. Now we know Trudeau has previously said he's going to move the embassy to Jerusalem. He's just supported all kinds of his stuff is that it's Iran behind the encampments in the summer, the student encampments. It was Iran behind that. He did that. He's saying it would be a what's the exact word he used? It would be gift to humanity if Israel bombs Iran. So he's taking just this wildly hardline positions on this, and I did an interview on with Samira Mohadin. You can see on my YouTube and on the Canadian Foreign Policy. The yapping Pierre Poilievre is a yapping Zionist Chihuahua, which I took from Dmitry Lascaris. That's him that I first saw label Poilievre in that way. And then I guess just to finish off, there's a story about titled "How a Bubble Zone Protest Law Could Cover Most of Central Toronto." And so the Zionists are trying to get these bubble zones. They did one in Vaughan, but this story shows a map of all the different, religious community and other institutions that they're trying to get under this bubble zone, and basically it covers all of Toronto. Or the map shows, much of the central kind of area of Toronto because it's 100 meters. So they're basically trying to get protest ban in much of or most of Toronto. And again, this is 15 months into this Holocaust, and they are still on the offensive. I'll leave it at that, and I'll make Laura a co-host. And if anyone has comments or questions, go ahead. think you should be co-host now. Uh, Go ahead, Yuri. Go ahead.
Okay, I was trying to type up my questions, but anyways, my question is this, Eve. So I have four questions. You don't have to answer them all, but here it goes. Has Canada spoken out at all about the ongoing political detention of Imran Khan and a lot of his political supporters? And what has Canada's response so far been to the huge political crisis that's going on in Korea? I know, and and with that, can you actually shed any light on how on if Canada has always been supportive of reactionary forces in both Pakistan and Korea? And then with regards to the ridiculous non-anti-Semitism crisis and liberal Zionists continuing to be so vain that they still think that Palestine is about them. What I mean, at this point, should I mean at this point should people in the Palestine movement, particularly Jewish anti-Zionist movement, tell these folks to just like, dude, like at best, sign a petition when we need you, but just stay out of the movement if you're going to continue to make the issue all about you and your oversensitivity when the issue is not about you, it's about the suffering of Palestinians. And we've talked about this many times before about the ghastly National Post and Post media's anti-Palestinianism. But what in international law can folks try to do hypothetically to try to bring the National Post and other outlets' grotesque anti-Palestinianism into, the whole trying to bring Israel to account for a genocide?
Yeah, I don't. That's an interesting question around the National Post. I mean, I think there could be some, if people had the energy, some interesting campaigning around advertisers to the National Post. That would be something worth considering. It would be not, it wouldn't be easy, but that's something. Um, I think people need to be absolutely direct, with particularly with uh, Jewish self-described pro-Palestinian or anti-genocide people. Like if people, someone who's on an IJV discussion group, obviously self-identifies as being against the genocide. And I think people need to be much more forthright and direct in calling bullshit and questioning, like, you're willing to, after, is there a threshold, like how many Palestinians have to be killed before you're willing to sort of say, like even if someone reads this article, I mean, I guess it's a discussion group, but like, to it's a public, and so to have the sort of boldness 15 months into this to be like, Eve's an anti-Semite for saying that Mossad may, this is what the person was claiming, Mossad may have been involved in targeting Jewish community institutions. To have the boldness to say that publicly, I find that just, in an IJV discussion, that just speaks to, um, I think, how morally divorced from reality they are. Because, like, the horrors we're seeing are so wild that it's like so inconsequential, just and I think it's very likely that Mossad is involved. You can read the language I use. I don't use particularly, definitive language. And so people need to be basically, they need to be told directly that, the Canadian Jewish community, there is one socioeconomic indicator that is widely used with regards to racism, where the Jewish community is fares poorly, and that is hate crimes. All of the other indicators, the vast majority of the other indicators, the Jewish community actually is better represented. They are better represented in positions of authority and wealth. That's just reality. That has to be part of the discussion about how much concern we're going to have with regards to anti-Semitism. But the main thing that needs to be is the nothing that's happened in Canada comes even in the like speckle of close to what's happening in Gaza. And so like that, but while it's being mobilized, the anti-Semitism is being mobilized to justify what's happening in Gaza. So that needs to be, people need to be told this directly, and they need to be told it, quite frankly, emotionally. People need to understand. The people in IJV in the discussion group need to know how angry I personally, how angry I am towards somebody who 15 months into this is still, that's still where they're at, right? And I think that needs to be generalized.
Exactly.
I think other anti-Zionist Jews need to make that clear to people who are holding this discussion back out of the most self-absorbed concerns. Shifting into the different gear, the Pakistan thing. I tried to do an interview about 4 or 5 months ago when I was in uh, Waterloo for some events. There was somebody, an activist from the Pakistani community, was coming that was sort of, against the coup. Came to the event, this sort of smaller event, so we had to talk. And I wanted to do an interview on Canada Pakistan. He kind of talked a little bit about it. I don't know what ended up happening with that. I tried to contact him to do that interview, but that I don't know. He didn't get back to me. I don't actually can't remember. But so I don't think the King government's done much. I think very soft support for, Imran Khan was viewed as sort of maybe a little bit going towards Russia, and the Americans are happy with ousting, and then all that's happened since, the King government's been very, not willing to get involved. I don't think that they not willing to criticize. I don't think they're, particularly involved. South Korea is a bit more geopolitically sensitive, I think. And what one of the things that I got thinking about, I haven't had an opportunity to do this, and I don't believe I've ever looked into this question, is that South Korea, of course, had a. I don't know much about what Canada's policy was after the Korean War. It had a pretty brutal dictatorship, and it was not, didn't have uh, essentially elections. I don't know all the specifics here, but I think until 1987. And I don't know. Almost.
Actually, I think even I think even later than that, it was
Is it
a
even later
very
than that?
very
Yeah,
repressive
yeah. So, or this,
things.
yeah.
I
So,
think
so,
only like yeah, I think
but
only
so,
like in the 1990s where they allowed like proper democratic
okay. So,
elections.
yeah. So that that's an interest. I'm curious to know what Canadian policy. I can presume what it was. I'm pretty sure the Canadian government
Yeah,
backed the dictatorship and was, right. But I don't actually know much about the details of that. And even the more you learn about like the UN structure still being, in operation, what probably was decent number of Canadian troops, either still in South Korea in 1957 and 1960 or 19, I don't know. I don't know actually know much about that. There was a lot of Canadian troops, of course, during the Korean War, and I know there was still like quite a bit of naval patrols until 55. But probably that continued. I don't really know it. So that is something that made me think that I'd actually like to look into. Um, yeah, I
Okay,
think that's
Alan, go
yeah.
ahead. Oh, sorry. Alan, go ahead. Alan?
Uh, Hello, yes. I just wanted to bring, I just wanted to bring to the attention of everyone that just this afternoon I was looking into YouTube, and I found two. One was a German officer in their army, and the other one was a member of parliament. Um, from Germany, and they were commenting on this whole thing and brought out a whole bunch of the truths about this Russia Ukraine thing, and it was very interesting. And that's just one thing. So I just wanted that people would be aware of this, because you can get a lot of information, the truth on this, that doesn't come out in Western media. So that was the extent of my comments. So
On the note of YouTube, if people haven't seen it, um, the interview, which was Hans, that's the roots. And we had a bit of a discussion. I think it was last week or the week before. The interview with Jose
Mm.
on Canada Mexico, I thought was a very good interview, and it's
Mhm.
gotten very good YouTube circulation. So anyone who hasn't checked that out,
Yeah,
that's
very
worth
good.
worth checking out that interview.
Yeah, I liked it. Go ahead, Nadia. Can you unmute, please?
Hi, thank you, Eve. I just wanted to mention the person who was speaking just before me said that there is no information on in the West on Ukraine and so on. Two very good sources I find are Jeffrey Sachs and Mir. How do you spell his name? Mearsheimer.
Yeah, John Mearsheimer.
Mhm.
So these two are actually very good sources of information against the empire, against the evil empire.
Yeah, I think Ivan if you're on X, I think Ivan Kachanovsky. That's not. He's he's very good. He's very obviously very knowledgeable about Ukraine.
Better than Jeffrey Sachs.
Yeah, he's way more knowledgeable. I mean, we did that. Canadian Foreign Policy Institute did that webinar with him and Jeffrey Sachs. He's written multiple books on Ukraine. He's Ukrainian. He speaks Russian. He speaks Ukrainian. He speaks English. He unfortunately his accent is a bit too strong in English for the interviews. I don't think are totally top notch. But yeah, in terms of if you're on X, he's definitely worth following.
I also wanted to ask you, um, I, I want to know what is the position of Yuval Noah Harari on the Palestinian issue. Is he with us or against us or what?
Who was that?
Yuval Noah Harari.
Oh, that's the Israeli he did
Think
the book on like yeah,
uh,
I know I have the face. I think he's a liberal Zionist, but I'm not really sure. I've seen some stuff.
not
I'm
sure
not really sure.
because he sort of I saw an interview with him and he's right on everything else except I'm not sure. I think he said that there's enough room for both Israelis and Palestinians to live together, but it seems to me he criticized Israel for not wanting to recognize that there's such a thing as Palestinian people.
He
I
he
I'm not
he gets a
sure.
lot he gets a lot of space in the dominant media, so I don't
Yes,
follow him very closely, but I'm kind of doubtful that he's that good politically on a bunch of issues, but I don't really know.
It's
I
gonna.
think he's on record as still even propping up the two-state solution. He certainly backs the protests against Netanyahu for overturning for his crazy judicial reviews. But yeah, I think at best he's liberal Zionist.
I was just going to tell you, Eve, if you're for that article you're writing on Jimmy Carter, you're thinking of writing. Chris Hedges has an article out on his foreign policy today, a very critical look at him. If you go to his Substack.
And if people have, I see there's no more questions. If people have any other ideas for interviews, do please send me. I want to do more of these interviews, and like a lot of them they can get quite a few views. I'm kind of taken aback. They get, let's just say, there's a lot more people watching these interviews than reading any of my articles. So I feel like I should do more of these interviews with different people. Obviously, I'm trying to keep them all Canadian, and that's difficult. But I think it's possible to so many topics out there and to delve kind of into the specifics of topics. I think at 15-20 minutes. So if anyone have ideas of other themes, other people to interview, even if they're not Canadian, if there's an obvious way I can sort of weave in the Canadian angle, please do email me those things.
Yeah, I liked your interview with that guy, Jose. I was wondering, had you known him before, the guy from Soberania and Venezuela Analysis? Had you, when
Uh,
he lived in Canada?
not personally. I'd seen his stuff with Venezuela analysis. I actually tried to interview him on like Canadian mining and sort of like the GM corn stuff 4 or 5 months ago, and I don't think he was as sort of knowledgeable or into that subject, but yeah, no, I'd seen him with Venezuela analysis and seen him a bit online, but yeah, I thought he was very good, and the interview kind of went in a little bit of some sort of surprising directions a little bit. I thought that it that was the I think that was the theme that Hans was looking for back a couple weeks ago, or whatever, when he brought it up. And I think there's more interviews, not to keep going on this, but there's more interviews. I think there's this whole question of like how limited a reaction there is to Donald Trump talking of like making Canada the 51st state. I think that really is fundamentally part of that is because so much of or basically the entire kind of media world believes in the US empire. So it's like, well, okay, it's not that big a deal. It's like it's so subordinate. And then Maud Barlow is just such an egregious example of that. Anyway, so I want to keep that going. Oh, the other thing, just on the interview idea, the other thing I want to do is I want to do debates. So if people know any like right wingers, or I'd like to do some debates on different elements of Canadian foreign policy. Either me versus them, or it could even be four people. Anyways, if people have ideas.
Okay. Okay.
Happy New Year, Eve.
Happy
Yeah,
New Year,
thanks,
everyone.
Steve. Yeah.
Take
Yeah.
care. Yeah, Happy New Year. See
Bye,
ya.
Alan.